So my work in resilience is tangential to sustainability in housing. However, it has often been about integrating within those efforts. I'm going to share a few ideas for integrating across initiatives. Most of what I'm presenting is the intellectual capital of others. I'm not a systems thinking thought leader. I'm here to share the tools that have helped me think about integrating across teams and initiatives. Oops, yeah, start my video. There we go. You guys can see me now. A lot of us currently operate in order. We nest under a specific department, and for good reason. Order is really helpful. Chaos isn't an effective alternative. So how do we think about exploring chaos a little bit and find new ways to integrate? My goal today is to offer a few different frameworks that might support you in exploring the chaos that our world is, with your counterparts and coming out of it with a more balanced approach. The presentation is organized into 3 bite-sized pieces. I'll touch on some work from OPR on plan alignment guides. I'll then pivot to a quick highlight on visual frameworks you can use in your work. And then I'll finish with a quick case study of an integrative strategy from Plan Bay Area 2050. Integrated planning is really hard. In many instances, it's just we're just not set up for integration. We compartmentalize pieces into order. There are many plans owned by many people with different timelines, changing requirements, and differing goals. However, each is an opportunity to advance a sustainability, housing, or in the case of this graphic, a resilience initiative. Prioritizing what plan should be integrated is important because it's not really going to be possible potentially to hit every single one. The graphic on the right here is organizing plans in a hierarchy for the resilience sector. So if you were trying to advance GHG reduction or housing affordability, you might rearrange some of these elements or add new ones. If I was interested in integrating a topic into multiple plans, I might start with 2 key questions. What are the top 3 plans to integrate your mission or vision? And can you map out people and timelines for each plan in your community? And the good news is that there's starting to become more and more resources out there for how to do aligned or integrated planning. So this is work coming out of the Office of Planning and Research. They have the Coastal Compass, which is very focused on sea level rise and coastal flooding, and how you can integrate that topic across kind of all those different planning elements that were on the previous slide. They are also actively working on a wildfire alignment guide. And while both of these are very focused on climate adaptation and resilience topics, there are some kind of general findings that are within these alignment guides that could be useful for regardless of what initiative it is that you are advancing. And one of the things that OPR has done is really just thought about integration pathways. When working on integration across plans, I can't recommend enough a needs assessment that lists the components of each initiative or plan. And OPR has started to put these together into a few different pathways that you might consider for updating an individual plan or element. These might be helpful visuals when considering integration approaches with others in your jurisdiction. It's also worth mentioning that many times you don't get to choose which pathway you're on. That's, the update timeline or something else that's really governing that. Understanding where you are is incredibly helpful, and it helps you identify when and where the opportunities for integration are and what the priority might be at any point in time. So I'm a very visual thinker, and so I've found the concurrent, cascading, and sequential pathways really helpful in thinking about how plans can be integrated and what's the timeline for doing so. I was also asked to just speak very briefly on housing element updates and how there's that link there between sustainability, GHG reduction, and the larger housing space. And it sounds like from the introductions from the counties, this is already happening in most places across the region. And for good reason. There's a hook there. There's a requirement in the housing element to link those topics, which is always a helpful thing when you're looking to integrate. Over the past year, I've been working with colleagues at MTC and ABAG, and then with cities in the region on how do we integrate resilience topics into the housing elements. And we put together a range of technical assistance to do so, really looking at where are those opportunities for integration. There is a link there at the bottom of the slide, and I believe that might also be available in another format. In terms of identifying the pathway for integration with the housing element, I think it's just really important to understand the current context if you're not already engaged, where most Bay Area jurisdictions are in the 11th hour of housing elements currently. There may still be an opportunity in some form or another to influence the current housing element update, and BayREN has a guide to support you in doing that in terms of identifying some model policies. There's also an opportunity to look at the draft that's out there today. Is there the opportunity to integrate more? But also, what can you pull out of it and bring into a future climate action plan or whatever the next plan is going to be, so you're aligned with this new vision for housing in the community. And then the final piece of advice that I would give is debriefing an experience is actually a really great way to integrate across topics. It's a way to have honest and genuine conversations. And so whether or not you were involved in the housing element update, that's an opportunity to build relationships with staff in a different department or section. So I'm going to pivot now to the second topic on the agenda, which was visual frameworks. It's a bit of a wild card set of slides. I share them because I'm a visual thinker, and it's how I make sense of things. It may not be helpful for everyone, but I hope it's helpful for a few of you. All of these are borrowed from Dave Gray, who runs a consulting group out of Portland, Oregon. They're visual thinkers and help organizations understand what's happening and identifies ways that they can deliver better results. A lot of their work supports breaking down siloed organizations. I think Dave is great because he shares his tools. I've pulled generic visual frameworks from his Twitter feed that I think can be really helpful in facilitating a strategic conversation. When working across silos, there can often be miscommunication and missed communication. Visual frameworks can really help build shared understanding. And so I've just gone ahead and pulled out 6 specific examples from that prior slide that I might use when exploring integrating efforts with somebody else. So you could start in that upper left corner, identifying where you are and the existing gap between your efforts. Maybe the next step is you really identify the core goal, the uniform vision for your program and the elements of it. Maybe then there's an opportunity to create a matrix of where there is a nexus between the different components of your work, and so on and so forth, all the way down towards what are the small steps that you can take to continue to build towards a more integrated effort. I think visuals, again, are really helpful when trying to work across sections where you might use different language. If you're able to kind of draw things out, that can really help build communication and understanding. And so I'll pivot to the final topic, which is just highlighting very briefly Plan Bay Area 2050. So the plan was adopted last October, and it was a significant revamp from the prior plan. Prior plans have focused on GHG reduction, but in a very narrow sense as it relates to vehicle miles traveled and transportation emissions. This plan is a product of 35 strategies, and I'm going to focus on a single one that was focused on building emissions, but doing so in an integrated way. And that strategy was En2, or Environment, to provide means-based financial support to retrofit existing homes. And the vision for this program is really, understanding all the different goals and initiatives that are out there to improve the existing housing stock in the region. And we heard from a few of the county reps, a lot of folks I think are headed in this direction. I personally entered into the kind of professional space through the earthquake world. And so when I look at this home, I see the need to retrofit that crawl space in the unreinforced chimney. And maybe there's a need for an automatic gas shutoff valve so that in an earthquake, the gas stops flowing into the house. But depending on who you ask, there's going to be a much longer list of things that could be done to improve this home to bring it up to modern standards. And I think it's important, how quickly things change. So where there were opportunities to integrate 5 years ago, maybe is changing today, where that automatic gas shutoff valve for seismic, that there's policies out there in the Bay Area for that at point of sale. What does that look like in 2022 as we're talking about decarbonization? And it is exciting to see that a lot of decarbonization efforts are really starting to draw links to the resilience space. At ABAG and MTC, that previous slide was one way to visualize kind of what's happening at the individual building scale, but we've also tried to illustrate that through a lot of other different frameworks, really where we're trying to understand where is there a nexus between initiatives, where is there an opportunity, and with the resources that we have, what is the narrow way that we can kind of take action and move the needle on this topic. And so you can see here a few ways that we've worked to visualize these ideas. In terms of what we're doing, in the next year or so, for the past year, we hosted a working group on talking about the issues of wildfire and housing and how that can integrate within the housing element update, looking at building codes, looking at planning zone standards across the region. The second piece is we've been tracking a number of state policies, rules, and budget to enable integrative funding and programs. So anyone who's well-versed in BayREN, as well as pretty much any other funding source, knows that there's a lot of restrictions on how funds can be used for a very specific purpose. And so we're trying to work through the state budget to try and increase the flexibility of funds that are out there. We are trying to increase the amount of resources out there for seismic retrofit funds, and also trying to influence CARB's AB 32 draft scoping plan, where there's talk of decarbonization and other sustainability goals, and making sure that there's an opportunity to integrate across other topics, whether it's affordable housing or resilience. We also have a very specific effort where we're trying to link resilience and sustainability funding to support affordable housing. A lot of that work is really about looking at hazard mitigation funding from FEMA and understanding how that could be used to do acquisition and rehab preservation efforts in the region. I'll just finish with just a note that that strategy EN2 about existing residential buildings being upgraded. Another strategy, EN3, is all about decarbonizing public and commercial buildings. Both of those strategies are going to be revamped as part of the next Plan Bay Area update. The plan is updated every 4 years, so it's likely a year or so from now that we'll be kicking off the next effort. And so we'll be taking another look at, how can we strengthen these strategies in the plan and identify the actions for the next 4 years. So that's my presentation. Happy to take any questions that came up.
Thanks so much, Michael. So Nick had a great question. Looks like Karen is currently typing an answer, but let's go over to Jay, who raised their hand. Jay, I'm going to allow you to talk right now. And if you're there, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
But I have no question.
Okay. Since we have a minute, Michael, I think Nick's question is pretty good, even though Karen's answering it right now. I work as a volunteer on Albany's Climate Action Committee. I find our city very siloed. In my efforts to overcome this, always hit a wall of the Brown Act with the contractor city attorney, always overruling. Everything can't be done in a public meeting, and getting together ad hoc groups with folks not adequate. Any comments on how to address this?
I'm not sure if I'm following specifically, but I do think that there are, lots of efforts out there where there are committees that are being created, or, public workshops that are being held to have conversations, whether it's about integrating across topics. but I might be missing some of the nuance of your question there. So maybe I'll see what Karen comes up with, and then I can respond in the chat too, maybe as I read it through a second time.